On today's Locked On Jayhawks, we're previewing the Kansas Basketball Center position as we go through our different positional previews with KU basketball, about 4 weeks away from late night in the Phog from this Friday.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can hear me as well Monday through Friday from 3 to 6 p.m. on KLWN in Lawrence with Rock Chalk Sports Talk. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get any of your podcasts. You can also like and subscribe to our show on our YouTube page. On today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, talking a little KU basketball. We're 4 weeks away from late night in the Phog from this Friday, so a lot closer than you might think. And as great as KU football has been, we'll have plenty more KU football content coming at you through the rest of the week with the show. On to our center preview. We did our point guard preview last week. We're going to switch gears and go to the big men. We're going to go to the center position here for KU basketball on today's edition of the show. So who is in the group to begin with? Who are players that count, that are scholarship players, that could be a part of this? Well, Hunter Dickinson, that might be somebody that you might have heard of, right? He might have a pretty good season for KU. He's obviously in the group. Parker Braun, another transfer you bring over. Then you have Zach Clemence, who I guess technically a non-transfer transfer that you bring in / don't bring in. And KJ Adams, a returner in the front court for you at the center. You have 4 guys who can play the center position for you. Not that all of them will, but you have 4 guys that can fill that position for you and at least give you coverage there. Outside of that, you would be looking at either playing somebody like very small ball 5 or playing like a walk-on. But let's start with Hunter Dickinson. You're talking about a 4th-year junior here, comes in after 3 very successful years at Michigan. Last season with the Wolverines, he averages 18.5 points per game, 9 rebounds per game, good passer, good, efficiency from both 2-point and 3-point range and the free throw line. He is a star player for you, one that you come into the season. I mean, we haven't seen the preseason Big 12 basketball awards just yet. I'd imagine that'll come out in, I don't know, Big 12 Media Day is like October 18th, I think, something like that. Probably come out around that range, maybe a little bit before. Hunter Dickinson, it would not shock anyone if he was the preseason Big 12 Player of the Year, right? At the very least, you're going to imagine he'll be preseason Big 12 all-first team. He is expected to be the star player of your team. Maybe he won't end up being the best player on your team. Maybe you end up saying that's DeJuan Harris or Kevin McCullough because of the impact that they bring as an all-around player and, being kind of the glue to fitting things together and the defensive versatility that they bring to the table. But make no mistake, Hunter Dickinson is your go-to option on offense, and he will be statistically your best player come the end of this season. Again, 18.5 points last year, 9 rebounds per game. What are the over-unders on what he's going to do at Kansas this season? You've seen some people say, I think he can get 20 and 10 this year. I think Kansas is going to be balanced enough that it's going to be hard to do that, but I think the floor probably you're looking at 15, 16 points per game. The ceiling is you are looking at 20, 21 points per game. So maybe you just plop it right in the middle and say, 18 points per game around what he did last year. Same with rebounds. You look at floors probably like 7.5. The ceiling's probably 10. So maybe it's like 8.5, somewhere in that range for what you're putting up. But it's the impact that he's going to have in being a guy you can go to late in the shot clock if you don't have, another option you can go to. It's having a guy who can be the centerfold of the offense that can draw gravity from the opposing team, that can open up things for the rest of the players. Having that star player is going to be so impactful for what KU does this season. And Hunter Dickinson is obviously just that, and you expect very high things from him this year. Parker Braun, meanwhile, comes in. He started his career at Missouri for 2 years, then went to Santa Clara for 2 years, and now is at Kansas. He is a 5th-year senior, using his 5th year from the COVID year, which was his first year at Missouri. 6'10", 215 pounds. He's someone who's a very good athlete. We've heard a lot from Bill Self and even some of the players, even Christian and Parker Braun's mom, that he's the best athlete of the two between him and Christian and of the family with Landon as well. And so you have a really good athlete who's 6'10". Last season at Santa Clara, 7.7 points per game, 5.8 rebounds per game, 2 assists per game, so pretty good passer too. That's one thing that, like, everybody in the front court for Kansas is a good passer, and that helps you playing 2 of those guys next to each other. Also a block per game on 55% shooting, so good efficiency there. Wasn't somebody who's going to take a ton of shots. He's going to take open shots or good shots. 14 of 57 from three, so not a great percentage. For his career, he's at like 28% from three, which, again, not great, but that's enough there that you can shoot them, and enough there that if you had to play Parker Braun next to Hunter Dickinson, you feel like both guys collectively could shoot enough from three that you could space it out enough if you had to do that. He had a good little career at Santa Clara, had some good games at Gonzaga, or like when they played Gonzaga or some of the better teams in the West Coast Conference. So he's someone who all you're asking him to be is a possible rotation guy, be that backup center. There is a world out there where KJ Adams is playing your backup center minutes and Parker Braun's just a reserve big. But I think what's expected is more so that he'll be your backup center and play those minutes. It's not going to be a ton of minutes to go around. So it's just fill in those roles. Don't make a big mistake. And that's kind of what you expect from him. He'll play hard. He'll play good defense. He'll rebound enough. He'll hit an open dunk if you lay it off for him. He'll be a good enough passer. He won't be an issue for you. It's very similar to what Mitch Lightfoot was in his final season behind David McCormick. And Parker Braun had a really good hook shot in terms of some of his synergy numbers, similar to what Mitch Lightfoot did, where it's like, okay, we're going to let him take a hook shot or two every game, and he's going to shoot efficiently on it. And that's going to be enough for us in having a big man off the bench. Now, if Hunter Dickinson were to suffer some sort of an injury, can Parker Braun, for a limited standpoint, come in and be a guy who's playing 20 minutes per game for you as a center? That remains to be seen. But in his current role where you're hoping he is, and barring that disaster, then you expect more than enough from Parker Braun there. Zach Clemence will be a junior, so he's going to have 2 more years after this one. But the idea is to redshirt him. And that means that you'll have 2 more years after this one for Zach Clemence. Now, I remain, as much as KU has been adamant that this will stay the plan, if Zach Clemence just went off over the course of camp and into the season, and it was like, this guy looks like the former, top 40 recruit he was coming in, and we don't know how we can keep this guy off the court, I think KU would adjust from there. But realistically, the red shirt will stay in plan. And that'll be a good opportunity for him to improve on, adding strength and adding size and some of the little things and the rebounding and the defense and even fine-tuning the shot. Because as much as Zach Clemence, we've heard that, you go back to the high school numbers, really good shooter and three-point shooter. That hasn't translated over to Kansas. For his career, the three-point shooting is like 25%. The free throw shooting is really bad too. If you combine free throws and three-point shooting for Zach Clemence's career, he's at 35%, which would be good if it was just the three-point shooting. But it's free throws plus three-point shooting. 35% ain't going to cut it. So he has certain areas he can improve on. We'll see if that has an effect on KU in terms of, does he come back after this year? There was some hinting in the Kansas City Star article in interviewing his mom that he could end up transferring at the end of next offseason. I don't know, but at the very least, it gives KU another practice big and another body to kind of bang with Hunter Dickinson and Parker Braun. And then you have KJ Adams, who is a junior. We'll see how much KJ plays at the 5 this year. That was his predominant position a year ago. Probably going to play more of a 4 this year, but maybe he could play some backup minutes for it at the 5. Maybe in that scenario I mentioned where if Hunter Dickinson were to roll an ankle and be out for a week or 2 of the season, maybe you just move KJ Adams to the 5 and have Kevin play more of the 4 and have, more of your guards play the 1 through 3 for coverage there. But last year was really good. 10.6 points per game, 62% from the floor, 4.3 rebounds. You want to see the rebounding go up, but he gives you another name in the center room that you can go to if you really need to. But ideally, you won't have to, because everything with Hunter Dickinson and Parker Braun will hit, and they'll take coverage of the center minutes. Speaking of the minutes, let's get into our rotation minutes projection for the center position. We're also going to finish up, is this group better than last year? How does it rank amongst the rest of the Big 12 and maybe in the entire country? In just a moment here with Locked On Jayhawks. First, though, this episode of the show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive with ebay.com/motors. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply. Continuing on here with Locked On Jayhawks, getting to our minutes projection at the center position. And we'll have more of these previews. It'll be kind of a once-a-week thing. We'll get to maybe the four men or something like that next week, and then we'll work our way into kind of the guard positions for the future shows. Center position's a little bit easier. Obviously, you have 40 minutes to give out at each position, 40 minutes here at the five-man spot. Hunter Dickinson's going to be playing a lot of those. Now, I do think there are three primary scenarios you could get yourself into about how this could work out, how this could shake out and divvy out from the minutes projections. Here's my top scenario, my most likely or what I'm kind of projecting right now. My top scenario, Hunter Dickinson gets 32 minutes per game. He was playing about 30 minutes per game at Michigan, 32 minutes per game at Michigan last year. We have seen in the past, I mean, I go back to the 2010-2011 Kansas team, which was a great team. It was a deep team. And that team ended up, I think there's Brady Morningstar led the team in minutes per game at like 28, 29. Marcus Morris was like at 28 minutes per game. Maybe that could happen. And you see Hunter Dickinson at 28, 30 minutes per game. And that allows you more minutes for Parker Braun or for KJ Adams here or there, for Johnny Furphy, so he can play the four, and then you can have KJ at the five, whatever it is. Maybe that could happen. But top scenario, I think most likely Hunter Dickinson plays those 32. This is not your big man like a David McCormick or Udoka Azubuike, where, those guys were only going to be on the court, even by their final year, 22, 25 minutes in a given game, maybe later in the season in an important game, 28 minutes per game or something along that notion. But with Hunter Dickinson, he is more of that guy that can sustain on the court a little bit longer, just from an energy perspective. So I could see this being low 30. So I have it at 32 minutes per game for what he's going to give. That leaves you with only 8 minutes as the backup five position. Zach Clemence red shirts, so 0 there. KJ Adams just plays all his minutes at the four. Honestly, they looked good in KJ Adams and Hunter Dickinson in the Puerto Rico trip, and how those two were meshing together, how those two were playing together, that I have a little less worries or questions or concerns about how those two are going to go together. So I feel confident given all the KJ Adams minutes at the four there. And that leaves you the 8 minutes for Parker Braun. So that gives you 8 minutes a game for Parker Braun off the bench. Mitch Lightfoot was playing about, 10, 15 minutes per game off the bench for KU a couple years ago. Maybe not quite as much this year, but that's enough where for Parker Braun that gets you into two rotations in the game, maybe for 1 4-minute stretch in the first half, 1 4-minute stretch in the second half, or maybe, 2 3-minute stretches over the course of first and second half, 1 2-minute stretch here or there, just to give Hunter Dickinson a little bit of a breather and provide those backup minutes roll. That's what I have for my projection. But I do acknowledge there are a couple other possible scenarios here. I think the secondary scenario, I'm going to stay with Hunter Dickinson at 32 minutes per game, which is what he was at Michigan a year ago, and that KJ Adams plays the backup 5 minutes. So KJ takes all 8 of the backup 5 minutes, and then Parker Braun doesn't play any minutes. Zach Clemence doesn't play any minutes because he's redshirting. And with Parker Braun, he's just in there as a reserve big man, where it's like, yes, on a majority basis, KJ's playing all the backup 5 minutes, but there will obviously be certain nights where, Hunter Dickinson or KJ Adams gets in foul trouble. And in that specific scenario, you bring in Parker Braun and he plays his handful of minutes for that specific game, kind of spot handful of minutes. That if you're not comfortable with how Parker Braun didn't have the best trip in Puerto Rico, if you're not comfortable with how that goes, then maybe you just say we go to the guys we trust, and that KJ's our backup 5 there, and then he's playing those 8 minutes as the backup 5. Maybe he's getting another, 15, 20 as the 4-man. So that's giving him 23 to 28 minutes per game. That's just allowing you to play more of Kevin McCullough, Johnny Furphy at the 4 and getting them minutes, 4 and the 3 for both those, and play some of your guards more. And it just cuts more minutes around for some of the other players around in other spots. Then there's the tertiary scenario here, which is, let's shave a few minutes off Hunter Dickinson. I'll say 30 minutes per game for Hunter Dickinson. And then you do kind of a mix of both. Parker Braun gets 5 minutes per game at the 5. KJ Adams gets 5 minutes per game at the 5. And then he's still getting his 20, 23 minutes or whatever at the 4 position, which still shaves a few minutes off for you to give a little bit extra to some of the guard players, to Kevin McCullough or Johnny Furphy at the 4. But also allows you to be Parker Braun in the rotation. Those, to me, are the main kind of 3 scenarios of how this could kind of work out at the center position. To me, I think the first scenario, Dickinson at 32, Braun at 8, KJ playing all his minutes at the 4, Clemence redshirting, I think that scenario is the most likely for the start of the season and for the non-conference part of the season. Come maybe Big 12 play, if not then maybe by postseason or the end of the regular season. If Parker Braun hasn't gotten more comfortable, then I think scenario B would be very likely that it's just like, hey, we're going to narrow this down to a 7 or 8 man rotation. And one of the ways you can do that is saying, okay, Dickinson, you're still going to get your 32 minutes per game at the 5. KJ, you're just going to play the backup minutes at the 5, the rest of your minutes at the 4, and that'll allow us to narrow down the rotation where we'll just play the guards a little bit more. I could see that being the case for the end of the season, with scenario A being the case for the start of the season. All right, we're going to continue on here with Locked On Jayhawks. Is this group better than last year? Is it the best in the Big 12? Is it one of the best in the country? That coming up in just a moment here with Locked On Jayhawks. First, though, this episode of the show is brought to you by Jase Medical. With storms, shortages, pandemics, reliance on China, and supply chain issues, we need to be prepared now more than ever. Jace Medical is simple. You go online, fill out a form, and then you get a prescription, life-saving medications right to your door. The Jace case gives you a peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency, but Jace Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. You don't have to go to the store. You don't have to wait for, something to get there that maybe isn't going to get there because you might need it right now. The Jace case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. And all it takes to get a Jace case is fill out a simple online form, and in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of our board-certified physicians. Get ongoing care from our physicians on any treatment-related questions, doctor-created, doctor-recommended. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jace Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using code LOCKEDON at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. All right, finishing things up here with Locked On Jayhawks with this group. Overall, is this group better than last year? On its own, just by having Hunter Dickinson, this group is better than last year. If you're cross-comparing the players, you would say, okay, we have KJ this year, KJ last year. KJ should be even better this year than he was a year ago. So check mark there. Hunter Dickinson versus having Ernest Uday last year. Okay, Hunter Dickinson should be better than Ernest Uday was last year. Okay, check mark there. Parker Braun versus Zuby Ejiofor. I think the long term of Zuby Ejiofor better than Parker Braun, but is this year's version of Parker Braun better than last year's version of true freshman Zuby Ejiofor? Probably. So another check mark there. And obviously then you, I guess, say you have slightly deeper or more options to go to because you still had Zach Clemence and Cam Martin on last year's team, and this year's team, if you're redshirting Zach Clemence, you don't have 4th and 5th center options should you get there, though Clemence and Martin did have to deal with, it seemed like, some injury stuff over the course of the year. It's bar none better than it was last season. It's not really even close. But even if you didn't want to do the comparisons, just saying you have Hunter Dickinson, who's going to play, 75, 80% of your minutes at the 5, that is going to inherently give you an upgrade at that position from a year ago. That's 75 to 80% of minutes of an All-American level center for you. That, as great as KJ was at filling in there, you still missed out on some stuff with having that giant in the middle of a defense and getting some rebounding numbers and having somebody you could throw it to in the post. That this center position, just by having Hunter Dickinson on its own, is better. But then when you go through the line and make some of those comparisons anyway, it's also better there. Now, how does it rank in the Big 12? How does it rank in the country? It'll be interesting because there's not a lot of other true traditional, really good centers in the Big 12. You go across the conference, you look at some of the other top teams like Houston. I don't know that they necessarily play a traditional center. Texas is a team that is very interesting at center. They would probably be maybe your biggest competition, but I think it's clearly Kansas over them because they bring in Caden Shedrick for Virginia. I think he's going to be coming off the bench, but he's a solid player. Dylan Dessou was unbelievable to finish the season for them and in the Big 12 and NCAA tournament. If he plays like that, they're going to probably have the second best center position in the conference, but it's still, you take Hunter Dickinson over Dylan Dessou. I'm taking KJ Adams over Caden Shedrick there, and you still have Parker Braun. So that's a good comparison, but still, with Kansas State, they've got some interesting bodies throughout there, but I don't know, Naquan Tomlin's more of like a wing than he is kind of a center. They have Ngesson, something like that. I guess that's kind of interesting. Baylor is kind of interesting because you have another year back of everyday Jonathan Chachua at the center position. What is he going to look like in another year from now? But there's not a ton of those traditional centers in the conference. And you lost some guys like Eddie Lampkin. You lost Caleb Boone via the transfer portal for both of those guys. Tanner Groves is gone from Oklahoma. He graduates. I think it's pretty clear Kansas has the best center position in the conference. And when you're looking at the country, it's a little harder to diagnose. There's some of those teams, like Zach Edey's back. It's hard not to say like Purdue just doesn't have the best center position because you have the National Player of the Year back at the center position. So I don't know. It's hard to like pick over that. There's some other really good centers across the country too. You know, even look at like the front court for what Duke has. I don't know how they're going to play these guys. Like, is Kyle Filipowski? Do you count him at 4? Do you count him at 5? Whatever it is, like Duke's going to have a really good front court though. Kentucky has a lot of interesting talent at the 5 position, but there are a lot of young players and freshmen. Certainly Kansas is on the short list though. It's harder to pick from the country, but they're on that short list. They're in that top 10, maybe that top 5 of the country. Maybe they'll end up being, you know, the best, and maybe Hunter Dickinson will outplay Zach Edey this year. But definitely in the conference, I feel like they have the best center position in the Big 12. That'll do it for the Locked On Jayhawks today of our center preview. We'll be back tomorrow, more KU football talk. We've got our KU Nevada preview still coming later this week with Locked On Jayhawks. You can find the show anywhere you get any of your podcasts. You can find it on our YouTube page as well. We'll see you next time with Locked On Jayhawks.